Welcome into the CBS Sports College Football Picks Show. I'm Richard Johnson. I'm joined by Emery Hunt and Brad Crawford. Over the next hour, we are going to give you your college football fix and get you some late week picks to get you ready for Friday night and Saturday afternoon. Fellas, we're going to win some money on this show this season. Let's start with the headlines you need to know before our college football weekend. First, Alabama and Florida State, one of the biggest games of week one in Tallahassee. Florida State finally opening up that brand new Doak Campbell Stadium. Alabama will be without defensive lineman Tim Keenan. He had tightrope surgery earlier this week. Alabama is a 2-touchdown favorite in this game. We're expecting the Tide to roll. Emery, how do you think Tim Keenan's injury will affect the Tide against Florida State?
This is huge because defensive interior pressure versus mobile, shorter quarterbacks is always paramount. And when you don't have that for Alabama, yes, I know they have 15 other big guys that could clog up the middle, but this was important. So if you don't have him up front on the interior, Thomas Castellanos, who's been talking a lot of trash all summer, my kind of guy, I like it going into this ball game. But if you don't have the big guy kind of getting that interior pressure, it creates all kind of time in the pocket. Also creates advantageous rush lanes and passing windows for him to accomplish this goal. I think this game will be a lot closer than that 2-touchdown spread, but him not being out there along with other starters is going to be a problem for Alabama.
Yeah, for me, I mean, this is an injury. This is an injury that Bama has experienced before. Tua Tagovailoa a couple of years ago, Richard missed 3 or 4 weeks with that tightrope ankle surgery. Brock Bowers, we saw at Georgia a couple of years ago, missed it too. But for me, I think the injury would mean more for the Crimson Tide if this was Deontay Lawson or one of their starting edge rushers, because you want to be able to keep Thomas Castellanos between the tackles. And I think at defensive tackle, Bama has more depth than they have at the edge. So I'd be a bit more worried on the Bama side here if I was playing Bama minus 13.5 if it was Deontay Lawson or one of those starting edge guys who was out with ankle surgery.
Yeah, Jeremiah Beeman, sophomore Edric Hill is probably going to slide over into there to try to fill the gap in for Tim Keenan there at nose. But yeah, I also expect the Tide to roll in this game. It's going to be really interesting to see how Alabama gets that done. But Florida State, new offense, Tommy Castellanos, Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator in here. They have a lot of different transfer portal parts to try to replace what was broken last year on offense and really, really try to get better for Florida State. Cannot ever go 2-10 in Tallahassee. Absolutely not. To the big one tonight, Auburn versus Baylor. Auburn wide receiver Eric Singleton is dealing with a leg injury. He's been dealing with it for a couple weeks in training camp. Head coach Hugh Freeze says he will try to play, but he will be dealing with that leg injury against the Baylor Bears. Auburn is deep at the slot wide receiver position. Malcolm Simmons, Bryce Cain expected to fill in for Eric Singleton. But Singleton was one of the most sought-after transfer portal pieces out of any team this last December. Any team looking for a wide receiver would have loved to have had Singleton, who was at Georgia Tech last season. But, fellas, Baylor also has concerns in their secondary. Carl Williams, the fourth, the junior safety. Dave Aranda says if I were to bet, he probably doesn't make it. I hope that he does, which is not exactly too optimistic. Brad, I'll swing it to you first. How do you think Auburn and Baylor match up considering the injuries to the wide receiver and the defensive back room?
Yeah, this is a major loss for Auburn. I mean, we've seen it all spring and fall camp, Richard. Every highlight video that Auburn posts on X, you see Eric Singleton making plays, whether it's from the slot or making plays downfield, has great hands. And he's shown that last season at Georgia Tech. But you talk about the guys who must step up in his absence. This is a huge game for Jackson Arnold. His first start at Auburn, the transfer from Oklahoma. Hugh Freeze has kind of put all of his eggs in the Jackson Arnold basket, and Singleton was going to be a top guy outside of Ken Coleman. So I look at a guy, we already mentioned some names, but Horatio Fields from Wake Forest too, probably going to be on the fellow outside spot alongside Cam Coleman. He's a guy that I think will get more targets in this game if Eric Singleton cannot go. We mentioned the losses for Baylor in the secondary. Dave Aranda alluded to some of that this week. Auburn is going to try and stretch the field. Now, we know Hugh Freeze's offense is balanced, but if Jackson Arnold takes a couple shots early, maybe gets Cam Coleman for a couple yak plays in the first quarter, then Auburn's going to continue to try and pick on that depleted Baylor secondary.
I don't like the vibes in this ball game from the Auburn side of things. To me, this screams Baylor is going to, beat the brakes off Auburn, in my opinion. And the reason why you have all this productivity coming back to Baylor on both sides of the ball, a more trusted quarterback in Sawyer Robertson, in my opinion, than Jackson Arnold, who we just saw get jettisoned out of Oklahoma. And so there's a lot going on. There's a lot of I have to see it first from Auburn. And now with this injury and now with the questions around Hugh Freeze and what he's going to be and how he's going to accomplish his goal this year at Auburn, Baylor looks like they're going to come in ready to go and try to punch an SEC team in the mouth. So this is a huge loss for Auburn, but this is big for Baylor, in my opinion.
Yeah, the other thing to consider with Baylor as well, they've got some running back depth concerns as well behind Bryson Washington. Bryson Washington's a tremendous player, but Dawson Pendergrass earlier this week was announced is going to be out for the season with a lower body injury. Freshman Caden Knight probably expected to see some more playing time than he otherwise might have. So just pay attention to that tonight when Baylor plays Auburn. On Saturday night, LSU, Clemson, Battle of the Death Valleys. Yesterday evening, we got some late breaking news that LSU safety A.J. Halsey will miss the first half of the game. He had a penalty in Houston's bowl game, I should say, last season, which is where he played last year. He was ejected for an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty at the time. That was then changed to fighting, which requires a first half suspension for his next game. A.J. Halsey then transferred to LSU, which means he will be sitting out the first half of this game. I see Emory shaking his head. I'm going to get to Emory in just a second. LSU's defensive backcourt is the gem of their transfer portal haul this year. Virginia Tech cornerback Mansour Delane is in. NC State safety Tamarcus Cooley in. Florida State cornerback Jakeem Jackson. It's a great room on the back end for LSU, also including five-star high school recruit DJ Pickett, who has played really well in camp. But Emory, the way this shook out, some late breaking news with Halsey not being able to play in the first half on Saturday.
This is why I don't speak about my college escapades at Circuit City. You don't know when the statute of limitations run out. So I'm shocked this got out for LSU, and that's going to be a big loss for them for the first half at least.
I mean, for me, you look at what LSU has coming at the edge rusher position. If Jack Pyburn, Florida transfer, and Patrick Payton, Florida State transfer, can get pressure, then that will eliminate Halsey in that first half, him being absent. Now, the big issue for me is Halsey is great in run support. Clemson's going to have a balanced offense with Garrett Riley, Cade Klubnik, year 3 now with that marriage in Death Valley. So it is a loss for LSU, but it's just 2 quarters. Second half, that's where this game's going to be won at.
When we come back on the College Football Pick Show, we're going to talk about the game of the week. Texas, Ohio State. Arch Manning debut finally? Perhaps you've heard of him. We're going to talk about it next. Welcome back to the CBS Sports College Football Picks Show. Fellas, finally, week 1 is upon us, and we've got the big one at noon. Texas, Ohio State from the Horseshoe. The talk about Arch Manning can finally come to an end, at least the preseason talk. We are finally going to see him hit the field and get the keys to the castle with Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns. Brad Crawford, I'll swing it to you first. How do you see this game going in the Arch Manning debut?
Yeah, I'm going with Texas on the money line. Take the points if you want to, but I think Texas wins outright. Now, this is starting to feel a little bit trendy on the Texas side, but man, I'm having a hard time going with the home team in this game. Ohio State replaces both coordinators. Most of their front 7 defensively is new, and they're taking the field against Arch Manning, Trey Wisner, CJ Baxter, some really talented offensive players for the Longhorns. I don't think you're going to see Steve Sarkisian ask too much of Arch in this one, though. Texas is going to line up and make Ohio State prove to the Longhorns they can stop them between the tackles and in that A gap. So I like Texas going into Ohio Stadium, spoiling these national champions coronation party, and Texas winning this game outright, a big SEC over Big Ten Week 1 victory.
I like Ohio State on the money line. I like those guys to win this ball game. And when I look at this matchup, I look at it from a quarterback, free safety level. And Caleb Downs is the best defensive player in the country. Ohio State also has the best offensive player in the country in Jeremiah Smith. But when you think about Arch Manning, to me, he reminds me so much of how Alex Smith was at Utah. great dual threat athlete, can hit the timely shot deep down the field, nice touch on the ball, but he's a problem running the football. And right now, that's the element he has that Ohio State has a game plan for. We don't know much about his passing on a consistent basis, but I do like the fact that it's a road game. I know I'm not big on home in a way matters, but in this ball game against this opponent, it kind of does. It's the first big spot he's going to start on the road against this opponent, reigning national champions. They know, and talk about they in terms of Big Ten and Ohio State, want to squash this SEC talk. They want to squash this Arch Manning talk. I have to see it first with Arch in terms of the full 4 quarters of starting, because the last time we saw him against Ohio State kind of got knocked out. So we'll see if that's going to happen again, but I like Ohio State to win by a field goal.
I am taking Texas in this game as well. Fellas, I'm expecting shock and awe in this game from Steve Sarkisian finally getting to give Arch the keys fully. Obviously, he played a little bit last year. He played against Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State. He started in Quinn Ewers' stead when Ewers was hurt. But now that Arch has had a whole offseason, now that Sark has had a full offseason to implement an offense around him, I'm expecting a more varied offense. I'm expecting an offense that can do different things because Arch can touch different parts of the field with his arm. I'm also expecting Texas to be better in the red zone. They struggled in the red zone last year because I didn't think Quinn Ewers was good enough in some spots, especially when the field got condensed in tight windows. It's one of the reasons why I love Texas. And I do know, we all know, that Steve Sarkisian loves to draw up a script. Steve Sarkisian against Matt Patricia, new defensive coordinator at Ohio State, with a defensive line that I think is a little bit shaky, a little unproven. I think Texas comes out early, tries to test them, and I think Texas ends up winning this game. Emory, I know you're a Louisiana guy, Arch from New Orleans. What are the Louisiana people telling you about Arch and what kind of passer he really is?
Well, full disclosure, the high school he went to, Isidore Newman, is a private school. We used to trounce them every year to open up our season. We were a public school. So right now, everybody in New Orleans is like, well, we have to see him at Texas play against guys because he wasn't really playing against guys at Newman. But they like the fact that he was able to lead that program just like Eli was, just like Peyton did. And so they like his pedigree. They like his ability to, play up. They like that he got bigger. So when he came into Texas, he was a little bit lean. Now he's thickened out, which is why I threw that Alex Smith comp out there because of how Alex Smith was built and how he was utilized in Urban Meyer's offense as a runner. So they like that he's filling out his frame and he has that swag about him that all folks from the Crescent City have.
Brad, what are you expecting from Arch in this game?
I don't think Steve Sarkisian is going to ask Arch to throw for 330 to beat Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State's entire front seven, 6 new starters defensively, man, this is a brand new defense outside of the All-American Caleb Downs that we've already mentioned. And Texas likes to run the football. Now, Trey Wisener is going to have a big year, probably a 1,000-yard guy in the SEC. C.J. Baxter, former 5-star, coming back from that knee injury. Man, I am going to give those guys 40 carries combined and make Ohio State show me that they can stop it. Now, that said, if they are stacking the box and daring Arch Manning to throw, Ryan Wingo, he's the next best wide receiver outside of Jeremiah Smith in college football. So that's kind of an underrated storyline too. Ryan Wingo, potentially his breakout game comes Saturday in Columbus.
Texas on the defensive side of the ball, obviously, I don't think there's many question marks. There aren't many holes. The one thing that I've been looking at with Texas, though, is the interior of that defensive line. This is the 3rd year in a row they're trying to do it a little bit of a different way to fill that defensive interior. First year was with homegrown players. Second year was with transfer portal. This year is, again, mostly transfer portal on that defensive interior. We know what they have on the edges. Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill, on the back end with Michael Taft. They are really, really good at all 3 levels of the defense on the perimeter. But in the interior, I don't know. And Ohio State, Brad, that running back stable that they have, underrated. We know about Jeremiah Smith, but they're underrated. And I think for Julian Sayin coming in here in his first start, maybe you just turn around and hand that ball off and try to help your quarterback out, and you test Texas up front.
I don't know, man. Texas has to like the fact that Quinshon Judkinson's not coming on the field. Travion Henderson's not there. We saw him have a kickoff return the other night. Those are 2,000-yard backs, 2 guys that really helped Ohio State make that vast run through the playoff last season. So, yeah, there's some unproven threats in the Ohio State backfield. Maybe they have a breakout game too. But if I'm Julian Sayin, I'm going to try to get the ball at will to Jeremiah Smith as much as I can in that first half. Maybe get a lead and then Arch Manning playing from behind. We haven't seen that before.
Emory, are you at all concerned with the non-Jeremiah Smith wide receivers at Ohio State? Obviously, they had Emeka Egbuka last year, who was so great, really a pro playing in college last year, but they don't have that right now. Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss moving into starting roles alongside Jeremiah Smith in the Ohio State passing game.
Not at all. I actually like Ennis and I like Tate as well. And you get to be the direct beneficiary of ideal coverage. So you're going to see coverage roll towards Smith's side. So those guys, you always ask for, man, just give me a one-on-one matchup. Well, here you go. Here's your one-on-one matchup. I think that's how Ohio State starts the game, getting those guys involved, because they know at the end of the day, we can go to Smith in a case of emergency. So watch for those guys to get peppered with targets early, get them in a groove. Now you have to spread that coverage out. Now you go to Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, I'm really, really interested in how this Ohio State offense attempts to attack Texas on defense. It's going to be a fascinating matchup, game of the week. When we come back on the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show, we're coming at you. We're blitzing you with picks with Emory Hunt and Brad Crawford when we get back from the break. Welcome back to the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. I hope your offensive line is in a good spot because we are bringing you the Blitz. Each of us 2 picks to get you ready for your college football weekend. I will start us off. Utah -5.5 against UCLA. Give me the Utes. The Utes are my Big 12 championship pick. I think they are going to roll. They add Devin Dampier to the mix at quarterback and bring in from New Mexico their offensive coordinator. I think what they're going to do is, quite frankly, get back to basics, which means, fellas, they are going to run the absolute piss out of the ball. They are going to control the game. They are going to play physical Utah Utes football. Spencer Fano at tackle is a first-round draft pick. I cannot wait to see Utah get back to their identity this season. And I think they play really, really well. I know UCLA thinks very highly of Nico Iamaleava, the transfer that they got in that situation with Tennessee early in the offseason. But for me, give me Utah in this game.
I will say this, guy. I'll start the main thing first, right? And so I'm going to lay these 11.5 points with Louisiana over Rice.
Okay.
And the reason why, we all love NFL football, right? So that means you also love Osiris Torrance, Robert Hunt, Kevin Dotson, A.J. Gilly, Max Mitchell, all former Raging Cajuns. The point I'm making is that this team is always built stout on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Keep an eye out for Jordan Lawson, another outstanding edge rusher that they have coming out that program. Rice is going to get pushed around up front like Louisiana does, and they have 2 outstanding tailbacks, Perry, and get ready to learn how to speak Bill Davis, because he's going to tote the rock as well. Walker Howard, former LSU guy, former Ole Miss guy, goes back home to Lafayette, Louisiana. This is a very experienced football team despite some losses. Louisiana will cover this spread against Rice because, again, you know what we do Rice in Louisiana. The best kind of version of Rice I like is what we do to them on the field.
Yeah, my main pick, hammer it down, South Carolina -7.5 to cover against Virginia Tech in Atlanta. The Gamecocks have not looked good in consecutive season opening games under Shane Beamer. I think that changes Sunday afternoon. This is the first preseason ranking for South Carolina in almost a decade. At least for week 1, I think this team will handle the hype and really showcase what should be a very good offense with Lenore Sellers back at quarterback, Rasul Faison, the 1,100-yard transfer from Utah State, who just got eligible about 72 hours ago. Huge lead ball carrier for the Gamecocks. And the hype behind Sellers was real. Now, Shane Beamer, he did not release a depth chart for this game because reason being, I think you're going to see 1 or 2 true freshman starters, one being at wide receiver. So South Carolina has some weapons that maybe haven't been uncovered yet, along with Sellers and Faison. I like Gamecocks -7.5 over the Hokies.
Let me tell you something. If you thought we were going to get out of this show without Emory Hunt bringing up the Louisiana Raging Cage, you must not be familiar with my guy. Emory, are we not worried about Scott Abel and the Rice offense, the new look Rice Owls offense? We're not concerned about that?
Full disclosure, I'll let the country know this. I interviewed Scott Abel when he was at Washington and Lee, and I found all about Lex Vegas, right? His offense is outstanding. Rice will probably be top 3 in the country in rushing. Unfortunately for Scott Abel, my good friend, Washington and Lee, and then he went to Davidson, and now he's down at Rice, is that he's going to run to a Cajun buzzsaw out there on the field. That's half me being a homer. That's half me being a really good analyst. But Rice is in trouble in this ball game.
Brad, the South Carolina pick is interesting, especially when we talk about the wide receiver situation. Lenore Sellers, we know what he can do. He's a tremendous athlete, but he's got to be more developed as a passer, quite frankly. And to me, that wide receiver course, somebody's got to emerge. I mean, we can only say Nick Harbor is a great athlete for so long.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Harbor, former five-star, let's face it, he's been a bust so far. But this is the first offseason, Richard, that he ditched track for football full-time. Shane Beamer has said ad nauseum during fall camp, this has been his best practice by far. You've got Donovan Murph, one of 6 four-star freshman wide receivers, Brian Rowe, another one, and then Michael Smith. He's a tight end. And that Mike Shula offense, remember 2015 with the Panthers, Greg Olson had 1,100 yards receiving at tight end. Michael Smith, he's not Greg Olson yet, but he might be a leading target for this offense. And the Faison eligible ruling is just huge for South Carolina. I know close to that program, a lot of those coaches thought that maybe he would not be available for this week 1 matchup. And now that he is, he's going to get 20 to 25 touches Sunday afternoon.
Second round of picks during our Blitz segment. Georgia Tech -4 over Colorado. Give it to me tonight. I think the Bees buzz all over the Buffs. The problem is, I think Colorado is trying to rejigger its entire identity around trying to be more physical. No LaJohntay Wester, no Travis Hunter, no Jimmy Horn, no Will Shepherd in the wide receiver core. They say they want to run the ball more this year with Caden Salter at quarterback. I also think we expect to see Juju Lewis at some point. You know, the very last team I would try to establish a physical identity against if I was Colorado? The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. When Georgia Tech is in a spot where they're either the literal underdog against the spread or the narrative underdog, so to speak, where nobody believes in them, Brent Key gets those guys ready to play. They will have an absolute chip on their shoulder no matter what going into this game. And I think Georgia Tech, with that varied QB run game that Haynes King brings to the table, will have Georgia Tech ready to play in this spot. I think they run over Colorado, to be frank. Give me Georgia Tech -4. You could take this up -7, maybe even -10, and I'd still take it. I think Georgia Tech is in a really good spot tonight, guys.
Listen, I like that pick because Georgia Tech is my pick to win the ACC. I'm all in on Brent King, Haynes King being the best quarterback in the ACC. You can't sell me enough on Georgia Tech. I'm buying all the stocks. But there's a team down south that used to be dominant in college football that everyone used to stay away from. It was Southern Miss. When Southern Miss was dominant, they ran the triangle perfectly. They started with recruiting out of New Orleans, recruiting across Gulfport, Mobile to Pensacola, and back across those Mississippi Southern JUCOs. I think they're going to get back to that with Charles Huff as head coach. Half the team right now is former Marshall Thunderbird anyway. But when you look at how Mississippi State handled the Toledo situation, it was very bad. And now they're going to come into a situation where they're dealing with a team that no one, even within the state, used to want to play because of recruiting battles. Now you have a Southern Miss team that's talented. They have a great quarterback transferring in from Marshall and Braxton, so he's fantastic as well. I think this is a prime spot for Southern Miss to cover this spread. I will also sprinkle some on the money line. Give me Southern Miss +12.5.
On the money line too. So this is ground zero for week 1 betting for us, Emory, because I've got Mississippi State -12.5 on the other side going to Hattiesburg. Might as well attend this one because we both like it. But Jeff Lebby, Mississippi State head coach, heading into his second season, he's going to try and score as many points as he can in this season opener with a healthy Blake Shapen at quarterback. First time in months Mississippi State's had that. 65 new players on this roster for the Bulldogs. Shapen, we got to remember, had a great 2024 September, and then the wheels came off after he got hurt. Mississippi State, one of the more improved teams in the SEC. My big upset for this year, Mississippi State over Arizona State in week 2.
Brad, do you think Blake Shapen comes back in and it's just add water, instant offense here? Shapen obviously coming off the injury from last year.
I think that they added enough weapons this offseason in Starkville to have a formidable offense. Now, that said, I'm not, taking them to go 5-3 in the SEC this season and probably get to a bowl game, but I do think in this opening game, We're going to see a up-tempo, air raid style Jeff Lebby offense, and they should have no issues scoring 35, 40 points against Southern Miss.
Emory, you brought it up. I think it's a really key point about the culture down in Mississippi that Southern Miss, quite frankly, used to own. If if Southern Miss is able to get the victory over Mississippi State, just what would it mean from a cultural standpoint with what Charles Huff is trying to build in Hattiesburg?
It's going to be huge because now you open the doors to take away some of those talented players that Mississippi State used to go and recruit. And the same issues that kind of plague Mississippi State and Southern Miss has also plagued those Florida schools like Florida State, Florida, and Miami, because when those other FBS and big FCS programs popped up with programs, now kids that were going to be backups at those schools are now going to start at a UCF or USF. Same thing happened with Mississippi and Mississippi State and Southern Miss. When South Alabama popped up, that took away the Mobile market. When the FCS programs popped up in Louisiana, like Southeastern Louisiana, that took away some of the players that was coming out of New Orleans. So they're in a unique spot. But if he gets this win, that's huge for that area, the Southern Mississippi area, and also for that program.
Southern Miss, a proud program, alma mater of Brett Favre, amongst others. When we come back on the CBS College Football Picks Show, underdogs, we love them. We're going to give them to you after the break. Welcome back to the CBS Sports College Football Picks Show. We got underdog plays for you on this Friday, fellas. I will kick us off. Toledo over Kentucky, not just against the spread. I think Toledo does the thing outright. Second year in a row, the Rockets will beat an SEC team, beat the dregs of the SEC. They beat Mississippi State last year. I think Toledo is, quite frankly, my pick to win the MAC conference. Kentucky better not sleep on these Rockets. Kentucky has just not been good over the last few years. This solid Kentucky Wildcats program that we've come to know and love over the last few years, it has frankly eroded from the inside. Their interior advantage along the offensive line, it's just not there anymore. We know Mark Stoops had the dalliance with Texas A&M a couple years ago. They bring in Zach Calzada, a name you may remember. He transferred from A&M to Auburn and then UIW Incarnate Word. Now he's back up as the starting quarterback at Kentucky. Also, Toledo running back Chip Trayanum was on this Kentucky team last year. You're gonna expect him to really want to show out in front of his old crowd, his old team, a bunch of friends that he knows as well. So I know it's a little bit off the beaten path, and it's an underdog play, but give me the Toledo Rockets in this game. Emory Hunt loves him some underdogs. What dog are you taking this weekend?
Abilene Christian over Tulsa. I'm taking them plus the points, and then I'm going to double up and take them on the money line. People have to understand, and you guys know this better than most, how Texas high school football is king in some elements, right? And the byproduct of that is that these Texas college football programs are stuffed with talent. If you go down to Mary Hardin Baylor in Division III, they could go toe-to-toe with some FCS teams. That's how deep the talent is. So Abilene Christian may be an FCS by name, but when you look at their roster and how they play, they are littered with bounce backs from FBS programs, highly touted high school recruits, and you have Graham Harrell calling the plays. I think Tulsa, whose defense was terrible last year, defense may go from terrible to bad. That's not what you want to hear when you're facing an offense that's going to spread the field and pepper you with targets, a couple of NFL prospects on the perimeter. So Abilene Christian will look like a G5 program against Tulsa, especially up front in the trenches. Give me Abilene Christian plus 5.5 and also sprinkle some on the money line.
Yeah, I'm going to go in what amounts to almost a pick 'em here, but Miami plus 2.5, and I'll take Miami to beat Notre Dame outright Sunday night. I know Richard likes the SEC losing in week one. Here's a big spot for the ACC to get a big win over Notre Dame. Look, the key to beating the Irish this season for the Hurricanes is going to be stop the run and throw everything they can at limiting Jeremiah Love's production. You see there, Carson Beck, new quarterback from Miami, going to make his first start. C.J. Carr on the other side of Notre Dame making his first career start. Carson Beck is the more seasoned quarterback. He has been on the big stage before and won big games. And the one key factor to me in this game that determines the difference for Miami, the offensive line. I have talked to several sources down there in Coral Gables throughout the offseason. They have told me that this is the best Hurricanes offensive front, the two deep that is, in more than a decade. So I expect Miami to not only play well Sunday night, but win the line of scrimmage. And we can't often say that against Notre Dame because there's some big uglies that are usually often elite for the Fighting Irish.
Let's stick on this Miami Notre Dame game Sunday night because it's frankly one of the crown jewels of this week one weekend. For me, I think you get in a close game situation. Who would you rather? Would you rather Mario Cristobal, who you've quite literally seen lose games with late game management, or would you rather Marcus Freeman, who I think is the best game manager of any head coach, especially of any high level head coach? To me, I really like Notre Dame in this spot. I think that Miami, I think, is going to end up being pretty good this season. I think we're going to get the best version of Carson Beck this season because of the offensive line infrastructure in front of him. They're only changing out the center from last year's offensive line. CeCe Malagawa is a tremendous tackle for them as well. I think Miami's going to be fine on offense. But this Notre Dame team, man, I really, really like what this Notre Dame team brings to the table this season, Emory.
Guys, listen, y'all not gonna fool me, man. Listen, just because Carson Beck went from listening to TLC to now he's listening to the Miami Sound Machine and Gloria Stefan, he's still Carson Beck. So how he does versus pressure is the key. And pressure will be applied by Marcus Freeman in this defense. So until I see him step up in a big game versus pressure, as pressure from the defense, pressure of the situation, pressure of the moment, the magnitude of the ball game, I am taking Notre Dame to win soundly. I think they win by double digits. To me, this game will look a lot like the game they played against Texas A&M last year, and also how they were able to bounce back from their loss to Northern Illinois and roll everybody else on the schedule. So I think this is a football team that's coming in, even though they're breaking in a new quarterback. They got the best running back in the country. They have a defense and a defensive-minded head coach that everybody on that team believes in. I think Miami's in for a shock.
Brad, I think we're definitely going to expect some razzle-dazzle, I think, from Notre Dame as well. You've seen them throw some trick plays out there. You give Marcus Freeman 6 months, he's going to come up with something. How are you expecting Miami's defense to hold up? New defensive coordinator in there and some new pieces, especially on the back end on Miami's defense.
I was going to say, we have not brought up Ruben Bain, who I think can be the ACC Defensive Player of the Year off the edge. We talk about Carson Beck. How does he perform against pressure? How is C.J. Carr going to perform if Ruben Bain is coming off unabated off the edge, man? That's the key for me. I think Miami needs to blitz often C.J. Carr in the first half. Now, that being said, they've got to stop Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, two really good, probably the best tandem running backs in college football. One reason I did not take Jeremiah Love to win the Heisman is because Jadarian Price is probably going to have a 700 or 800 yard season as well. So Miami has to do what it can to first stop the run and then get after C.J. Carr, because if you get Notre Dame in third and long situations, that's where I think Miami can feast in this game. So I feel better now about picking Miami now that you guys are both on Notre Dame.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about Notre Dame heading into this spot is everybody talks a lot of trash about Miami's home environment and Miami's crowd. One thing I will give Miami fans every time is they show up for big games in marquee spot, and it doesn't really get much bigger or more marquee than Notre Dame at home on a Sunday night under the lights. Emory, we saw what happened last time Notre Dame went to Miami in a big night game. They got absolutely smoked in that game.
Here's the thing. If Notre Dame goes out there and they play assignment, sound, fundamentally sound football, they're already up 7 on Miami, because we know Miami will bring what to the table along with their fans? The undisciplined play. They're going to have at least 3 or 4 penalties that are, you like, yo, what are you doing? What are you thinking? That's going to give Notre Dame an extended drive or get them off the field as opposed to staying on the field. So for me, I just like the discipline, and I know what I'm going to get from Notre Dame. I think under Marcus Freeman, especially since we saw it already last year and how they went on that magical run and they used all their bullets in that first drive of the championship game, all 20 plays, and then they ran out of plays. I think they'll pace themselves in this one against Miami and split that up over the course of 4 quarters and knock out the Hurricanes.
Yeah, my question is, do we see Kenny Minchey at all in this game, Brad? Either in a package or, if CJ Carr doesn't really play well, is there a quick leash? We heard that quarterback battle was neck and neck through camp. Do you think we get any Kenny Minchey, Brad?
I think we do. I mean, we saw during spring practice, Marcus Freeman could not decide through 3.5 weeks of fall camp, he could not decide. For some reason, he goes Carr over Minchie, despite a lot of us insiders being told Minchie was going to be the guy. So I think you're going to see him in certain maybe red zone packages, or at least early. If Miami gets up in this game, which is a show me game for Carson Beck based on all the picks he threw last season at Georgia, if Miami gets an early lead and CJ Carr maybe has a couple possessions that are empty and no points, Kevin Minchie will get snaps in this game.
When we come back on the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show, you've heard a lot from us, but what does the model say this week? We're going to do that and a little bit more, some fun parlays when we come back. Welcome back to the CBS College Football Picks Show. Fellas, you've heard from us. What does the model say this week? This is our little segment at the end here. We're doing some model talk. We just talked a lot about Notre Dame and Miami, but the model says, fellas, one thing we didn't really discuss. What about the total? Total 49.5. CBS Sports Lines model with a value rating of 69% says over. Over is the play for Miami and Notre Dame, 49.5. To me, I'm expecting more of a tight game personally. Emory, what do you think about that?
I'm thinking the under, man. When you have, this is what I love about week 0 and week 1 in college football. It's so unique because you have all spring, all summer to work on one opponent. These games are going to be a lot closer than people think. They tend to be lower scoring unless you're playing out west in a God knows how long hour, on TV. But for the most part, these games are really tight and competitive and close because you have all that intel, all that film, all that prep work going into this first game. So this Notre Dame team versus Miami, this screams under to me more than anything.
Yeah, to me, it screams under too. I mean, this feels like a 23-20, 24-20 type game, maybe 10-3 at the half while teams kind of figure each other out offensively the first 2 quarters. We mentioned in the previous segment, just about how Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are going to be the keys for Notre Dame. If Miami does stop the run, I mean, how much is Marcus Freeman going to put on CJ Carr's shoulders? You don't want to throw a pick six on the road and get down in a game against a ranked, pretty good Miami team. So I would go under here. I'm anxious to see what this line does closer to kickoff now that we're about 48 hours away.
Yeah, we're going to see how the model ends up on Sunday night. But before we get out of here, we got to give you some Friday parlays. 3 legs, got to be plus 500 or higher. We're going to have some fun here on our way out. For me, let's talk about mine first. Tulane, minus 4.5 against Northwestern. That's my first leg. Georgia Tech, Colorado, under 51.5. It's my second leg on there. And then Emory Hunt's Louisiana Raging Cajuns against Rice. We talked about that early in the show. We're going to make a little etouffee. They're going to go over 47.5. I got that at plus 596. Emory, which leg are we liking? Which leg do we not like on that?
I love all of it. You got New Orleans in there for the Tulane folks in the Smart Bowl between Northwestern, and you also got our America's team, Raging Cajuns, in there as well. So, again, you did right by me. So, for me, I will say this, right? These suits ain't cheap. You know what I'm saying? That's why I'm in a polo right now, because you got to win these parlays. Baylor, money line, #1 over Auburn. And this is why I said this. Last night, everybody in the SEC was laughing at the Big Ten playing all these close games, but you didn't hear a peep coming out of Kentucky, out of, Auburn, out of Mississippi State, right? They were rather quiet online, right? But Baylor will beat Auburn, in my opinion. Next leg, Montana State plus 27.5 over Oregon, or against Oregon. And here's why. Oregon sort of was in a struggle with Idaho last year. Idaho is a good FCS team. Montana State is an elite FCS team. There are 3 elite teams in the FCS: North Dakota State, Montana State, and South Dakota State. So this game, judging by what we talked about all spring, all summer, working for this one opponent, and the added benefit of this being the game you got to show out and show for because it's on national TV, Montana State will play this like a national championship game and keep this one under that number. And last, but certainly not least, high school football in the state of Louisiana is so good that all 9 FCS and FBS programs are really good. There's not much difference in talent outside of LSU from Tulane to the other schools, right? And so with that being the backdrop, Southeastern Louisiana plus 13.5 versus Louisiana Tech. Southeastern Louisiana has a pro prospect on the defensive line and Caleb Proctor, 6'2", 290 pounds, 3 technique, fantastic on the interior. This game will be a lot closer than the experts think, so I'm taking the Lions plus the points here.
This is one of those rare college football viewing weekends where I'm going to let you enjoy your Saturday with no money in play. And my parlay is going to come out of the 2 Sunday games and Monday night TCU UNC. I'll go TCU minus 3.5 on the road at Chapel Hill, Bill Belichick's debut. I've got the under in the South Carolina Virginia Tech game Sunday afternoon. And then the third team to wrap it up is Miami plus 2.5 Sunday night. Now, the good news here is this. If you win the first 2 legs, you can cash out and take some money before that UNC game Monday night. If one of those first 2 picks loses, you can put it all on TCU because that's the strongest play here. I think TCU goes to Kenan Stadium, spoils Bill Belichick's first game with the Tar Heels. This is a roster that outside of Gio Lopez is very it's iffy to me for UNC. And TCU, on the other hand, brings back 16 starters. Josh Hoover, maybe a future NFL quarterback. He's a guy that I think is undervalued right now in the Big 12. So TCU minus 3.5 is the strongest play here, but this 3-teamer should cash for you in week 1.
Brad, me and you are going to be hanging out in Chapel Hill with Chapel Bill Monday night. I think UNC is going to have a little something for TCU, though, man. I don't know what they're going to do the rest of the season, but you give Bill Belichick, 8 months to try to cook up a game plan? I do like UNC in this specific spot. It's my only qualm with your picks, Brad.
It could, I mean, if Josh Hoover has an early turnover or TCU has some offside, Kenan Stadium, I talked to a UNC guy earlier this week. They're expecting, sellout crowd, best environment, maybe 2019 against Miami, 2012 they beat NC State in a really good game. So we haven't seen many top 25 fields at UNC before, but this is a spotlight opportunity on Labor Day night, the only game in town on national television. I still like TCU based on the veteran leadership, but if Gio Lopez plays well early in that first quarter, hits a couple deep balls early, that place is going to come out of its seat, and UNC should be able to win that game. But I still like TCU minus 3 in the book.
Emory, back to your parlay. You threw a little Montana State in there. Last year, Oregon struggled quite mightily with an FCS opponent week 1. Do you think Oregon is in a situation where they're just sleepwalking over week 1 opponents that come from the FCS that aren't marquee?
I think so. And when you look at this particular matchup, Montana State was down big. Granted, it was New Mexico, but they came all the way back and beat New Mexico. That was also with touchdown timing a lot. Now they're replacing a new quarterback, but the pride is still there. They're deep in the backfield, and they also are very strong on both sides of the line of scrimmage, especially on defense. So there'll be a pesky nuisance. Oregon will win the game, but it won't be by 28 points.
Yeah, Brad, we talk about when you talk about the Sunday game, South Carolina, Virginia Tech, that one going under, you wonder maybe South Carolina just hasn't found the offense as much to get into that game. And that game ends up going under. It's an interesting pick by you for that parlay.
Yeah, 2 new OCs in that game, Richard, and on defense, South Carolina loses 7 starters. They've heard all offseason how much of a loss Kyle Kennard and Tonka Hemingway and some of those guys. This secondary for the Gamecocks is going to be one of the best in college football, not just the SEC. I think Kyron Drones and Virginia Tech may have some issues establishing the passing game in that game and then getting explosive plays. So I like the Gamecocks to hold Virginia Tech under 17 points.
Emory Hunt, Brad Crawford, thanks for joining me. CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. I'm Richard Johnson. We appreciate you. See you next week. Thank you.